and I'm very much looking forward to this because I probably need a good tune-up. Fellas, go.
All right. This will be a very informal session, so if you've got any questions at any time, raise your hand, shout it out so that we can address it. This is just strictly a search that I've done on the internet. There's a wealth of information out there, but you know, it's so important to have your tools sharp so that you can get a nice fine cut and you don't hurt yourself. You know, a dull tool is a dangerous tool. You know, I recall a quote from Abraham Lincoln said, you know, if you have 10 hours to go into the forest and cut trees, the first 9 hours you should probably spend sharpening your axe. We've got tools available to us today that we can very quickly sharpen and end up with a nice edge on our tools as we begin to turn. So,
if there's a particular tool that you have trouble with, make sure we talk about it, and we'll try and help you determine how to sharpen it and how best to put the right edge on it and get it sharp. So.
Okay, so let's start off with the slides, just a few slides. Okay, next one. You know, when you talk about sharpening, you know, why do you want to sharpen? Well, you know, because a sharp tool is a safer tool. It's less force to cut the wood as you go through it, and because there's less force involved, then you know that gives you more control over the work that you've got going on, and less fatigue. And when you get tired and fatigued, that's when you end up with an injury. And it'll give you a good, clean surface when you're through. You can avoid the dreaded sandpaper to as much as possible if you got a good sharp tool as you're going through with it. Okay, Mike, I have to wait for.
That's because you weren't standing in front of the camera. I couldn't get it over that far.
Oh, well. This was an anonymous presentation.
Like John was throwing his voice.
Yeah. So when you look at various tool types, so much of it is determined by the tool geometry and the tool point. You know, you've got cutting tools, you know, your chisels, your gouges, and then there's various types of chisels that you've got. With your gouges, you know, you can go down and see the variation that you go in there, and then you know you get to some of the unique tools, you know, like the Tormek, you know, which is a round tip, circular tip to cut with, or you end up with some of the hook tools, which some folks use very effectively on the inside of bowls. And then you've got scrapers, which are basically flat. And then they'll have a sphere point, round nose, you know, and they have a different function, and they're sharpened differently. If you're going to be an effective turner, you need to understand how you need to sharpen them. And how you need to get to where you can sharpen them quickly and consistently. Because if you can sharpen them quickly and consistently, you can get back to the fun part of making chips. Okay? We're going to try to talk about, you know, things that are important in sharpening. You know, you need to determine the correct geometry for the tool that you want to use. You want to sharpen without producing a lot of heat on the tool. So with a lot of dry grind type sharpeners or belt sander sharpeners, you can generate a lot of heat on the tool, and of course that heat takes the temper out of the metal. You want a consistent, repeatable edge. So if you've got a bowl gouge or a roughing gouge, you want a nice, smooth, conical shape on it, not a lot of waves in it, and you want it to be consistent across the face of the tool. And no matter how much time you spend, how persistent you are, how painstakingly you work to sharpen that tool, it's only a temporary situation because it's going to dull. And again, if you can sharpen consistently and repeatedly with the same cut on the tool, then you don't spend all your time at the tool jig, you spend your time at the lathe. So I'm going to let John take over and talk about some of the geometry of the tools and the angles associated with those.
The first one up here is obviously a curved straight scraper, and the angle of the bevel, on here they recommend 45 degrees. In my opinion, that angle is not critical. As long as you cut back some so that you're not rubbing a bevel on the wood at all, because a scraper only uses that very top edge as a sharp area for usage in scraping. Other shapes, as you can see, depending on whether you want to do some scraping on the outside of a bowl or inside on some end grain, they come in all kinds of different shapes and angles, and the angles that you want to put on them are all dependent upon what and how you're using them. They can be anywhere from just a 1/4 inch wide to a couple inches wide on a scraper, but it just depends on what your use is. And most scrapers are used on end grain instead of side grain, so if you're doing an inside of a bowl, there are people that scrape the inside of a bowl because it tends to work really well. I don't recommend a lot of usage of scrapers on side grain. You don't get as nice a cut. You get a really nice good cut on end grain. So, any questions on scrapers?
Recommended handle lengths. It shows, as the scraper, as it gets smaller, the smaller handle. Does that make a big difference? The length of the handle, because on the diagram it says handle length for 2 inches 24 and for 1/2 inches.
If you've got a 2-inch scraper and you're hanging over the tool rest a long way trying to get down into the bottom of a bowl, it's important that you have a fairly long handle. You want to keep the length over the tool rest as short as possible all the time. But if you're in the bottom of a bowl and you're in a deep bowl, you may not be able to do that. So you want a fairly heavy scraper for that, and then you'll want something that's got a fairly long handle. So it really depends on how far off the tool rest you're going to be as far as handle design goes.
All right, what I'm thinking of, okay, let's say I have a 1/2 inch one, and could I use a 24-inch handle? I mean, if I have a longer handle for a smaller one, is that going to affect it that much? Okay.
No.
If I got one that's like 2 feet, I can use interchangeable heads with it, is what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. The what? Oh, a burr. Yeah, let's talk about the burr on a scraper. Here's a typical scraper. This is one I like to use a lot as a shear scraper on the outside of a bowl. And you can, if you take it right off the grinder, you get a really good solid burr on it. But it's a very aggressive burr. And so you may not want to have it that aggressive. So one of the things I do is I will take a hone and I'll take the top of that burr off. I'll just scrape it right off. And then I'll take a burnishing tool, and this tool is carbide, and I'll just run that across the edge of the scraper once or twice, and that will raise a burr, and it gives you a much finer burr, and it's not nearly as aggressive, and it'll give you a really nice fine cut. So you can pass that around and you can feel the burr that's on there. A burr right off, depending on whether you're on a really coarse grinding wheel or you're on a fine grinding wheel, you'll get a rather severe burr right off the grinding wheel. And if you want a good aggressive cut, that's a good way of doing it. Take it right off the grinding wheel. Gouges. There's all kinds of magic about gouges. Everybody has their own opinion of gouges. A spindle gouge has got to have a 60-degree angle on it. A bowl gouge has got to have a 45-degree angle on it. A roughing gouge has got to have something else. And really the angles are what you're used to using. And you can't use a shallow fluted spindle gouge in the bottom of a bowl because the angle is going to be way too sharp and it's going to be way too aggressive. And so I wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to say you've got, and I know a particular turner that says his bowl gouges have to have an angle of 41.5 degrees. And you ask him why, and he says because that's the angle of a beaver tooth. Well, so he says the beaver is the most effective in cutting down trees, and so that's the most effective angle. But really, he sets his gauge at 45, or his tool rest at 45 degrees when he sharpens. So 41.5 degrees. It's not that critical. It's what you get used to doing. Spindle gouges or shallow fluted gouges tend to have a longer angle, or a more shallow angle than a deep fluted. In this case, a deep fluted is a bowl gouge, and typically a bowl gouge would be about 45 degrees. But again, it's not super critical if it's 42 degrees or 48 degrees or 50 degrees. It's what you end up being used to using, as long as you're consistent and you know what that angle is. Spindle roughing gouges obviously are only used on spindles and not on bowls. And I think a 45 or 50 degree angle on those works really well. And I would show you my spindle roughing gouge, but it's still packed away from our class that we had this week with Neil. Excuse me? You're welcome. So, any questions on gouges? You want to talk about skews?
Yeah. Skews are, I've taken one course from Alan Lacer, and you know, he lives and dies with the skew. I mean, he's obsessed with it. It really does leave a nice shearing cut, but it's probably the scariest looking tool in the set that you've got. Again, the key is that as you use the skew, you're not gouging the wood away from the surface. You're really just actually shearing the fibers at the surface of the wood, and you end up with a very, very smooth cut. There's curved skews or straight skews that come in different lengths. You see that they've got different profiles. You know, most of them are flat. You have some of them that are oval. If you listen to Alan Lacer talk, he'll tell you that the only thing an oval skew is good for is planting potatoes. He doesn't have much faith in them. But again, you can see the profile difference. And again, the whole key is the angle of that bevel, and the angle of the tool allows you to really shear the wood fibers as it turns on the lathe.
none of our charts talk about it, but my preferred profile of a skew is one that's not straight, that doesn't have a straight angle, but has a curved angle on it. And I grind these particularly so that they have a little bit of, almost a little bit of flat for the first 20%, and then it tapers down. It has much less tendency to catch, and particularly for really small, thin spindles, I think it's much easier to use than a straight skew. And as Sam said, this oval skew is really good for planting potatoes. I don't care for it at all. You put it on a tool rest and it tends to rock. It's very hard to sharpen. And so this, by far, is the profile I like the best on a skew.
May I see it?
I'm sorry?
May I see it?
Yeah, we'll pass them around.
The other thing on a skew is that if you look at the side grind of the angle, that generally is about 1.5 times the thickness of the skew as you go through. And again, most of them, what works well for you is what you should use as you go.
Look for a flat face on your grind, or a concave face.
This is a hollow grind, so it's concave, all right. And the nice thing about the concave is that, you know, as you use a skew, you can very quickly go back with a hone and hone the edge of it and get a nice sharp edge on it very quick in between sharpenings.
If you hone a concave ground skew, you only touch the tip and the heel, so that it's very easy to hone an edge back on it rather than take it back to your grinder. Most people sharpen them on a wheel, so you're automatically going to get a concave, unless you sharpen it on a stone to try and get it flat.
It also gets aggressive sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
With concave.
It does. It does.
Sam?
Yes, sir.
Up there you have 3 different angles, 60, 30, and 15 degrees. So what angle do you grind your skew at? Your grinder?
Well, the bevel part here is like 15 degrees on either side, okay? And then across the face of it is generally about a 30 degree is where most of them are set up.
You have a robo rest, what would you put it, 60 or 30 or what? You know, the one robo rest that has, the guy makes, that puts degrees on the platform?
I'm not familiar with it. Not familiar with it. Okay?
Any other questions on skews? It's probably the one tool that most people try and stay away from because they're afraid of it. It catches easily. We've got 3 gals here that have been using skews now for 3 days and turning.
Not afraid anymore.
And
Cautious, but not afraid.
and they really did really well with them. So, you know, you don't have to be afraid of a skew.
We have our stuff that we make with the skew.
That's good.
It's stuff.
So, parting tools. There is an absolute variety of parting tools. My favorite parting tool isn't even up here. It's an old hacksaw blade, an industrial hacksaw blade that's about this long and it's about that wide, and it's only about 35 or 40 thousandths thick, and it gives me the best parting tool I've ever had. So, some parting tools come with a curved portion on the tip. I don't have one of those. I don't know how they work. The problem I see with those is as you try and sharpen them, you're going to end up eventually grinding that away, and so a parting tool can come in almost any shape. If you look at Craft Supply catalog, you find that There are some really wide parting tools. There's some narrow parting tools. My friend Niels uses a parting tool that must be about 1/8 of an inch thick and about 20 thousandths wide, and so he gets a very, very thin, narrow cut with it. So you can make a parting tool to do anything you want, and a lot of people just make their own and sharpen it the way they like. It's really a tool that cuts with a burr. So you put a burr on it, and or a very, very sharp point. If you're going in straight, you'll cut with the burr. If you have a sharp edge on it, you'll want to ride the bevel and follow the cut down. Any questions on parting tools?
Back on the skew, on this curved skew, it's got a rounded on one edge and flat on the other edge. Reason for that?
I like skews that have on the short edge or the bottom edge are rounded so that when you lay them on your tool rest, they'll glide across the tool rest because of the roundness. If they have a sharp edge on it, they'll dig into your tool rest. And a lot of people like it flat on the long point so they can lay it on the tool rest and start their V-cuts, and so that it sits flat on the tool rest. I prefer it to be a little round on both sides because I'll sometimes go in with the long point as a shear cut or a cut versus just going in straight to make the V-cuts with it. So.
On your skew, what's the advantage of sharpening it this way instead of all one side?
If you sharpen it only one side, it ends up being a chisel, not a skew.
Okay, there it is. It's got the same way.
You can only cut one way with it.
Okay.
So you need to cut it on both sides.
Okay.
And as you sharpen it, you want to sharpen a little bit on one side, turn it over, sharpen a little on the other side, so you keep the sharp edge right in the middle of the steel.
Okay, thank you.
Sharpening. Excuse me. My trick knee.
So, now that you've fully explored the geometry and the design, what kind of tool to use to get that edge on there. And, there are many different types of sharpening tools that Carter has little liver pills. Everybody wants a piece of that market. When you get down to it, there's basically dry grinding, wet grinding, and then in the dry grinding, you've also got the wheel, you've got the belt, like a belt sander, and then you have others that are sort of a horizontal flat disc that you can grind on. This is out of AAW, where they basically looked at the variety of manufacturers, the size, the speed. You'll note that most of them are generally 1,750, 1,800 RPMs. You've got some of the others that'll turn a little higher speed. As you go the higher speed, you're going to generate more heat. And price, whatever you want to pay, you can find to look at that. You flip the next one.
Sam?
Yes, sir.
Somebody told me, and I think this is true, that the Woodcraft one is on sale today only, I think, for $99. So, and
Which is a great.
If you use the code 555, you get $5 more on it.
All right, that's terrific.
Can you buy it online?
If you buy online, yeah. So if you're thinking of buying one, this would be a good day to do it.
Yeah, that's a great price.
Today only?
Today only.
That's shop.
Not online. You got till midnight. Again, here another list of the grinding jigs that folks will use on the the grinding machines. You know, there are all kinds of platform rests. There's all kinds of jigs to lock in that angle that you want on your tool. Again, we'll have this on the website, and this comes right out of AAW. Next one. You have a number of wet grinders. Those basically use a stone wheel in a water bath that their primary function is to keep the tool cool as you grind. They can get some of them can get quite pricey.
These are particularly good for our high carbon steel tools, whereas our used high speed steel.
Mm-hmm.
What is the RPM on those wet grinders?
It's very slow. This one, I don't know the RPM on there. It's much slower as it turns. Yeah. I mean,
90 RPM.
90. Which is great when you're trying to work with, say, carving tools, small carving tools. It gives you a lot more control as you go through. But again, the principal difference between the two is one uses a water bath to keep it cool. The other, you have to pace yourself to keep your tool cool. Okay. Some of the latest stuff that's come around has been with belt sanders. You know, a lot of the technology that's come around and abrasives that you can put on these belts is pretty amazing. It's not your old dad's belt sander anymore. And so there are a lot of folks that will use these as sharpening tools. A lot of the guys that do knives will use a lot of these. And then there's the rotary see-through, which next one. The rotary see-through, which again, there's a platen with an abrasive on the surface of it. Some of them you can actually see through the wheels it spins, so that you can see the face that you're cutting. I've seen some pretty impressive stuff with this. The one at the bottom, the Work Sharp. You know, the number of different types of abrasives they have, you know, will go up to 4,000 or 6,000 grit material when you're doing chisels. Is very nice and pretty effective tool. When we look at some of the other accessories that makes it easier to get going with sharpening your tools, we've talked a lot about angles. What's a good angle for the tool to be sharpened to? A good machinist protractor, very inexpensive tool, is very helpful. You know, you can pick these up at Lowe's, Home Depot, where you can actually measure the angle of the tool itself. Then if you have eyes like mine, a magnifying glass is good, where you can actually see the surface. Amazing, a Sharpie pen is great. You know, when you first start and you're going to resharpen, you take a Sharpie and you cover the surface that you're going to resharpen, and just a quick pass will tell you, do you have it set up correctly? You know, does that stone cut the entire surface, or the bottom half, the top half, so you can make adjustments before you get started with it. The diamond hones, again, we talked about, particularly with the skew, a diamond hone is nice to keep the tool sharp in between going back and forth to the grinders. One of the other areas that you've got is on your gouges. As you sharpen it, you'll end up with a burr on the fluted side of the gouge. You can hone that burr, keep it nice and sharp. And of course, John has shown you the burnisher that as you've sharpened your scraper, that you can end up with that really fine hook edge on the edge of that scraper, so that it really works as a very fine shear as you come across the surface of the wood. Yes, ma'am.
So is burnisher only used for scrapers? Or do you use it for other tools that you're sharpening?
I only use it as
Scrapers.
We all talked about it, all the furniture, never mind.
And there's two easy types. One of them is as John had previously shown, which is a very hard bar that you run over the edge of the tool after sharpen. There's another one John Beasley has in his shop that it's actually mounted on the table, which is 2 pins, so that you can hold the tool flat on the jig and use 1 pin as a lever and then run it across to end up with the burnished hook on the edge of it. Okay.
I think by far the most popular sharpening system on the market is probably an 8-inch grinder. There's probably more wood turners that have an 8-inch grinder than any other sharpening system. And with an 8-inch grinder, if you add the Wolverine jig system to it, it makes a really versatile grinding system. There's a lot of people that sharpen by hand, but they still have a jig system where they have a platform that they can put their tool on, to even if they're sharpening by hand. But an 8-inch grinder with aluminum oxide wheels is relatively inexpensive. As Neil said, right now they're $99 at Woodcraft. And make sure you get white or blue wheels, not the standard gray wheels that come at Home Depot or somebody like that. You want a good aluminum oxide wheel. That is by far the most popular grinding system. So for $100 you can buy the grinder with wheels, and I think the Wolverine jig is about $80 at Craft Supply. And so for $180 you've got an absolutely really good grinding system for sharpening tools. I'm sorry? This thing. Yeah, that's a separate item when you...
What company got them?
I'm sorry?
What company?
Craft Supply.
Woodcraft.
Oneway makes them. Yeah. Or you can buy them from Craft Supply or any of the Woodcraft or any of the good.
And how much is it with wheels?
A grinder right now at Woodcraft is $100 with wheels.
Like those?
No, not these. These are specialty wheels that I've added to this. And these are called CBN wheels. CBN. Cubic boron nitrate wheels. And they come in 2 grits, or at least I have them in 2 grits. An 80 grit on one side and a 180 grit on the other side. And if you...
Worth the money. I used to think, no, they weren't. They're worth the money.
They really are. They're expensive. They're a couple $100 a piece for the wheels. So if you add $100 to the grinder, and $400 for the wheels. You got $500 into the system without the Wolverine jig, but they'll last forever. I mean, they will not wear out.
Use those on a regular grinder? You know, I've got a Rikon regular 8-inch one.
Yeah.
Yes, they just have to take their guards off.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the aluminum oxide wheels, you leave guards on because those wheels can explode. These wheels can't explode, so I took the guards off. And now it gives me the opportunity to sharpen all kinds of different ways. And it's very effective. You want to talk about the Tormek?
Tormek is the one that I've settled on. Again, the reason I did is a lot of flexibility, carving tools, scissors. You know, if your wife is into quilting, you have to keep the scissors sharp. You make lots of points when you do that. Any number of different types. It's pricey. They've got attachments to do virtually any kind of sharpening that you want. Anything from your gouges to skews to sharpening scissors, your blades on your joiner, your drill bits, whatever you want to do, they've got an attachment for it. So it's a very flexible system. Again, it's a water cool, so the wheel rotates in a water bath. The wheel has the capability of effectively giving you two different grits. There's a dressing stone that you can use with it to move it to a much finer, from like a 180 to a 220 grit. And then, of course, it's got the leather strap wheel to finish the grind on. Again, a lot of flexibility, but it's pricey. You have to find what fits your purpose that you need when you look at it. Unlike the CBN wheels, this wheel does wear out. It's a stone wheel, so you have to keep it trued up. It will wear out. Good news is they don't wear out very fast. Bad news is when they do, they're very expensive wheels. They've got a niche market, and they know how to exploit the pricing power that they have. So what else we got next?
Anything left on that?
I don't think we have anything left. Okay, as we talked about, particularly with the gouges, every turner out there has got an angle that he likes on the end of his gouge. They're gouges that are a little bit flatter in the end, which is great when you go to the end of a bowl. You can see how you can begin to sweep back the edges of that bowl gouge, which makes it very nice as you're turning the outside. Gives you a much larger cutting area. The key as you go through these is that we talked about earlier, you want it consistent. You want the profile on the sides to match one another. You don't want one side different than the other. You want that symmetry there, and you want to keep that edge convex. You want it up. You don't want to dip in there, because if you get that dip in there, then that means you've got sharp edges that are going to catch as you begin to turn. One of the nice things that with this is a guide that comes out of Tormek, that it makes it easy because they've got the tool that you can hook your gouge to. You can set this angle here. You can set the depth of the tool away from the end, and then the distance from the wheel to the control bar that it sits on, and you can effectively with those three measurements very quickly go right back to that particular tool, if you've kept track of what those settings are, and repeat that very quickly as you go to turn that tool again. So it gives you an opportunity to experiment, to look. Again, with this, you know, I can do my spindle gouges with a very steep edge, so that I can get in and do some very fine detail work. I can do a bowl gouge that I can get into the bottom of the bowl, and then I can do the swept back edges that you'll hear folks talk about, like the Ellsworth grind or the Irish grind. And again, that's just where these guys have over time have chosen to modify the edge of the tool to give them better performance and to make it easier for them to turn whatever they want to turn. Is there any perfect single grind? No. And again, you got to take with a grain of salt when somebody comes with a new tool and they say you got to set it at 45.5 degrees. Is he selling tools, or is that what really works? Again, most of these guys have been at it a long time, and they've found something that works for them, and it's maybe physically the way they stand, or whatever works with them in their shop is what they recommend. But you find what works for you, and if you find what works for you, and it's comfortable and you can repeat it, that's a great thing. Because if you can, you'll keep the tool sharp and you'll enjoy the turning a lot more. Okay, jigs. We've talked a little bit about the jigs. You can see here Ellsworth was one of the ones that came out early on with his swept back design. Again, a lot of these tools just make it easy to be able to go in and reproduce the edge that you put on the tool the first time. You've got the Wolverine arm, which John has talked about here. Next one. You've got other guys that have theirs. The Very Grind, which again, much like this tool, allows you to change the angle so that you can end up with a different profile on the end of your gouge. And then, of course, Tormek. And Tormek is, you know, their big thing is they sell lots of attachments for their tools to be able to help you sharpen whatever you want to sharpen. Okay.
Or you
That's
can
it.
make your own jig. This is just a piece of nylon that I drilled a hole in to make a squeaky gouge out of. Added a bar and tried to set it up so that it sort of matched the Wolverine jig, and use that to sharpen, and it puts a nice profile on. Should we demonstrate?
Sure.
I'm going to demonstrate on sharpening my skew, and Sam will set up and do a tool. And one of the nice ways of, if you're just starting out, is take a magic marker. If you're comfortable with the angle of your tools, add a magic marker to it, so when you go up to your grinder, you can find the spot where you're grinding, and you can see on this one, I don't know if you can see it, I'm a little bit low. Oh, you're over here now. So I'm going to move my tool rest in a little bit, try it again. And now I'm getting a grind across all of the black marker, nice and even and uniform. So I'm just going to swing Dan, can you back up just a little bit because that other camera? I'm just going to swing the tool, sharpen it a little bit, turn it the other way, swing it. And just repeat it 3 or 4 times until that edge is just razor sharp. And that's all there is to it. And I've now ground off all the black mark. I know that I haven't changed the angle at all. I'm not going to hone it. I'm not going to hone it. I will do that. I'll take it straight from the grinder and use it. I do have a leather strap that I may put on it if I'm home, and you can put a razor edge on it, but I'll hone it in between grinds to keep the edge sharp. Tom?
I will admit I was skew adverse until John got me on this curved skew, and they work wonders. They are really great. But I was scared to death of the skew until he sharpened mine, and now I sharpen it. But that rounded skew is wonderful for spindle work.
Okay, we're gonna do a bowl gouge now as well, and I use on the Wolverine jig, I use a Thompson stick out tool. I made my own out of a 2x4, and after I used it so long, it kept getting deeper and deeper. So if you make one out of a 2x4, put a nickel in the bottom of it so that it doesn't keep getting deeper and deeper. But this one was so cheap, and it's 1 3/4 deep, and so I use that to set the length. I think $12 or something. It's really not that bad. John, I'm not positive. But I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take a magic marker so you can make sure that the angle starts the same. I'm going to come close to setting it to the right angle. Check it. Now I've got just the black silver line through the black, so I know I've got it set right. And now I'm going to make sure that I get the side grind sharp as well as the tip. So I'm just going to rotate this back and forth.
So John, you set it up with just the very front edge, and then you automatically, by rotating it, your side edges come in automatically.
That's correct. Yeah. Now I can change the side angle, edge angle, if I want to, by readjusting where this grind lever goes. But I've set it up on this one so that and I've locked it in place so it's always uniform, it's always the same for every time I sharpen it. And one of the things I've always done, and some people may or may not like it, is I always take the sharp heel off. So when you're turning inside a bowl, your heel doesn't rub up against the side, and you end up with heel marks inside the bowl. So.
You are straight. But you start with the sides, both sides, and sweep it in the ends.
I start with sides because I consider the tip expensive tool. The sides are cheap. So I grind the sides first, but I don't want to be shortening the tool. So then once I get the sides ground, then I sharpen then I blend everything and make sure that I don't get a really sharp point on the tool while I'm sharpening it.
And you do that, put a block in there, quarter inch or 3/4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
inch and 3/4. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about here to get you the double bevel.
Oh, no, I don't need, I just take it off and I just grind it. I just grind the, and that's the nice part about doing this now without the guards on. You can see what you're doing and you can do it on any part of the wheel. John?
When you were sharpening that gouge, you were keeping it in the middle of the grinding wheel. I was through the whole, versus sweeping it as you did with the...
John's comment was when I was sharpening the gouge, I was keeping it in the middle of the wheel. And I try and do that. And if you look at this wheel, you can, it almost looks like it's a wear mark right in the middle. But I like to keep it as close to the middle as I can so that it holds the angles the way I want them.
And on this one here, you touch more to the top than to the bottom. Is that gonna, will that rub on the bottom affect, or you have to lean it more since you don't have it that way?
Well,
and see how this one is nice?
Yeah, I would probably take that off in the process of.
Okay, so you have to take it off.
Yeah, I would take it off. Yeah.
When I use my jig, sometimes this is on my bow gouge, and have it in the jig with the Wolverine, it'll vibrate loose and then slip. Is there any kind of...
You're talking about this portion? Do you have the new... See,
They sent me the replacement.
Wolverine, Oneway came out with a new system. You know, they used to have a spring in here. And that spring wasn't really reliable in holding it in place. And so if you contact Oneway, they will send you, or at least sell you if nothing else, these replacement. Are they $14 to replace them? And they don't move. Her question was that once she puts a tool in, that she was having trouble with it moving in and out of the jig, and with the new system, they don't move at all. You can really tighten them down nicely. The tool itself, that one tool that I'm passing around is a 3/8 inch high-speed steel rod. You can get it from Enco. That's where I buy it from. Yeah, the support rod's, I think, 3/16 or an 1/8 inch or something like that. John?
Would you discuss the importance of setting up your guide rails and so forth, and the issue if you get a pop one way or the other?
When you buy a grinder and you buy the Oneway system, it's absolutely critical that and Oneway sends instructions on how to do it, but it's critical that the system be set up absolutely perpendicular to your wheels and centered on the wheel. We spent some time this week with a grinder that was not centered and not straight, and you do not get good grinds when you do it. So when you set up your system, if you're going to go with a Oneway Wolverine system on a grinding wheels, you've got to make sure that the system is set up absolutely parallel with your wheels, and everything is parallel and perpendicular to the wheel, so that when you make your swing, you get the same swing on both sides of the grinding wheel.
Does that include both sides?
Yes, it does include both sides, and a tool rest and the bar. and you have to buy this separately. These come in different sizes, so all the way up to where you can put a 1-inch gouge in it if you want to. So, you want to do the Tormek?
So much like with the Wolverine system, again, you can monitor the angle, set the angle depending upon how far back you want it to sweep. You can set the distance that the tool extends from, or the gouge extends from the tool, which will help you in determining what profile that you're going to end up with. And then again, the distance from the control bar here to the edge of the wheel. The nice thing is that there's a handy dandy little tool that allows you to very quickly set the depth. The angle is marked here, and if you'll note on the tools, I've got a series of numbers and letters along the side, which tells me that I want to use number 4 on the angle here. I want the tool to extend out 65 millimeters, and I want the distance from the wheel to the bar here, using the A hole here to set that distance. And then as the tool sits in, again, I've blackened the edge. Now, the difference here is because I'm using a natural stone, what I need to do is use the whole surface of the tool, surface of the wheel, so that I can not wear a groove in this natural stone. So very quickly you can go back and put an edge, a very sharp edge on the tool, and then with the leather stropping wheel you can polish the edge, and you can take care of the burr on the inside, and then you're ready to go with a nice sharp tool to start again. Again, much like the Wolverine, a lot of flexibility depending on what you want the profile of the tool to look like, and to be able to repeat it time and time and time again with a specific tool. And my memory is so good, that's why I put the tape on there with the numbers.
Sam just brought up a really good point. If you use a aluminum oxide wheel, either on one of these grinders, you want to make sure that it's flat and it's clean. And so you've got to have a diamond dresser to dress that wheel periodically. He has the same problem with this wheel. He's going to have to dress it periodically if he ends up grinding only in one spot. So with aluminum oxide wheels, you've got to make sure they stay sharp, and they stay sharp by dressing them, cleaning out the old particles of steel that get embedded in them, and making sure that they're flat all the time. And one of the processes of doing that is after time your wheel's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and at some point you'll need to replace them. They'll get, I think the last time I replaced mine before I bought these is I had them under 6 inches. They were like 5.5 inches. And I was getting such terrible concave surfaces that I said, I've got to replace these wheels. So that was one of the reasons I ended up buying these CBN wheels. I had to replace them anyway. And I had to spend the money for a couple of aluminum oxide wheels. I said, I'll spend the money for a couple of good CBN wheels instead. So.
John's good like all of us. He can rationalize whatever he wants to buy.
Yourself using both grits, or do you gravitate toward one grit?
I gravitate a lot to the fine grit, but I do use them both if I want to reshape a tool, or I want to do some heavy grinding, or I want to make some tools. I make a lot of my own tools, and I'll use the really coarse grit to start.
Wheel, you'll use a CBN wheel for heavy hauling?
Yeah, I use the CBN 80 grit wheel to do most of the grinding on if I want to reshape something, or I want to make a tool. And then I'll finish it on the 180 grit to give me the fine edge. John?
Is there anything in the literature that's, I keep wondering if you're, for example, turning dry pecan, which I'm sworn off, but that you would change the angle and have less of a pointed, they have different,
Yes, there is.
you'd stay at 45-ish versus.
The question John's coming up with is dry pecan is like concrete, and do you want a different angle for a really hard wood than you do for a soft wood? And my friend John Horn says, yes, there is. I have not seen anything like that. So.
Stuart, Alan Batty's little book on wood turning notes, it shows 3 different examples of grinds or sharpening. For soft wood, you would use a more narrow angle. For the medium, it would turn out to be about a 40-degree angle. And then for very hard woods, you would have the angle more flat.
Everybody hear that, or do I need to repeat it? For hardwood, you'd want a more flat, steeper angle like.
So it doesn't cut into the wood as hard because you're going to, as like a detail gouge would be the soft wood, and then you would have a, I don't know what you call this, blunter. The angle would be less sharp.
Less sharp for harder woods.
For harder wood because you're going to be wearing the edge out quicker.
Yeah, if you're going to turn like pecan, you're going to need to sharpen often because it is so hard, it'll take the edge off your tool real quick. So.
If you're going to have one stone, what grade would you get? Like these?
180 grit.
That's the set I have. I have a 180 on one side, and I took the 120 off, and whatever was put on the inside, just to pull some off. I rarely ever use it.
When I first bought this, I only bought the 180 grit, and I had a aluminum oxide wheel on the other side. And when this wheel wore out, then I bought the 80 grit. If I were just buying one, I'd buy the 180 grit, yes.
Would you buy a 220 if they had one?
No. No. You would? I'd have to buy another motor if I bought another one. $99. I'm going to go look at that. They have a 240? Interesting. Not only that, but they now, these wheels now come with rounded edges. If you wanted to have a wheel with rounded edges, there may be an advantage to that. Neil's got one that came from Austria, I believe, and it's got a side edge on it as well with kind of a square corner, so you can do some grinding or shaping on the side of it. I think that would be an advantage, but I'm not going to reinvest in some more wheels.
Somebody makes them that they basically have a plastic core with a steel outside that are noisy as can be. Don't get them.
Yeah, they don't.
Get the D-Way all steel ones.
They don't work very well. There are several places you can buy the CBN wheels. D-Way Tools out of the West Coast has them. Johannes Mikkelsen is now selling some, and I think he is importing them from Austria. And at SWAT, there was a guy from Austria that was selling the one with the side grind on it. Is that who Mickelson has? The side grind? It's only on the 120? Okay. Well, he's got the rounded, I know. I don't know if he had the side grind, so. Yeah. D-Ways are from China. Johannes Mickelsons are from Austria. But yeah. Well, these are Chinese. These are from China. But you know, Dave Schweitzer, Dave Schweitzer that runs D-Way Tools stands behind him. If there's a problem, you send it back to him. Yeah. So, and the nice part about these is that I don't think they're nearly as dangerous as a aluminum oxide wheel. You know, I can put my hand on these. And they run smooth. They run cool. You don't have to heat your tools. Don't get heated up. It's like sharpening on a Tormek. You know, if you put a lot of pressure on it, you can burn a tool, but you don't need to put pressure on them with these wheels. So.
CBM?
CB, N as in Nancy. Cubic boron nitride.
Thank you.
We've got a gentleman that joined us tonight. He brought a whole bunch of tools along. When we have to take a break, we're going to try and sharpen up his tools for him. So somebody wants to watch how these work or wants to help, wants some experience trying it, we're going to let him try some. So come on up. And
I thought we were supposed to bring our tools. I haven't sharpened a tool in 2 weeks. I've got them all.